Hi, I'm Josh Carvin, and welcome to another Death Battle prediction video, but first, Danny Phantom versus Jake Long. The fight was, I keep on saying it like this, but basically exactly how I had expected. I don't think they did bring up any of the higher-end questionable feats for Jake, but ultimately that's kind of because they are questionable. They decided that they weren't applicable. The animation was okay. I don't think it's one of the better ones. I don't think it's one of the better sprite ones. It was absolutely serviceable. It's kind of like the archetypal 7 out of 10 kind of fight. The thing that made this fight kind of special though is the involvement of Butch Hartman, the creator of Danny Phantom. He reacted to the video, he was on the Death Battle cast, and they kind of talked about it. It's by far the most involved that any series creator has been in Death Battle itself, which really makes me curious about where it's going to go from there, because once we start getting creators involved, just like being on the thing, it's kind of crazy to think about where it could go. Like, imagine if they had the two creators of both characters or something like that, both reacting to the fight in the same video kind of thing. Like, imagine if Death Battle started doing something like that. It'd just be wild. But either way, that's kind of like just a funny thing that could happen. But it's really cool to see a creator kind of like getting involved in it, because it just shows how far Death Battle's come. Other than that, I don't really have too much to say in regards to that episode. So then we come to Wonderwoman versus She-Ra. So this has been a fight that public perception of it is kind of interesting. I do kind of want to talk about one aspect of it in particular, more towards the tail end of the video. So for now, we'll just get the prediction right out of the way fairly quick. On the Death Battle cast, they confirmed that for She-Ra, they are using the comics as supplemental material, with the cartoon as the primary canon. That's a bit of a strange wording, because the comics for He-Man actually do have quite a few multiversal feats. So much so, in fact, that if they include all of those feats and take them as they are, it would actually net She-Ra the win. Wonder Woman wouldn't really be able to do much to harm her. Wonder Woman doesn't really tend to have very much hacks in terms of overcoming disadvantages kind of thing like that. Like, she doesn't have any durability negation or anything like that would make it so that she can get around someone who's that powerful. And then the speed, I believe, is still in Wonder Woman's favor. That Shattered God feat is pretty nuts. And then there's just been plenty of times where she's tagged Flash and so on and so forth. That's kind of part of what I'm going to be talking about later. So, interestingly enough, the verdict for this fight ultimately comes down to, if they go buck wild with the comics, She-Ra wins. If not, Wonder Woman stomps. I don't think there's anything that's all that close if they don't go all in on the comics. But they did for characters like Optimus Prime, where the show was the primary material and the comics were supplementary. It's kind of the same situation there. So I think ultimately they probably will. So I've had a perfect record so far, so I don't want to mess it up. But I will go with She-Ra, hoping that the DC win streak ends. Yeah, honestly, their weapons and arsenals don't end up mattering very much in this case. Like, sure, She-Ra has, like, a ton of different, like, functionality with her sword, but end of the day, doesn't really mean much. She can turn it into an umbrella, whatever. Wonder Woman's God Blast. I don't think that would actually do anything, considering that I don't think that it comes from a deity. I think it just comes from straight magic. And then Lasso of Truth doesn't really matter. There's no specific, like, way to get around her capabilities. I don't recall. I don't think there's anything specific for that. So yeah, I am ultimately going to go with She-Ra. So this brings us to more or less, honestly, the main point that I want to try to get across in this video is that, so I'm fairly involved in the Death Battle community. I'm in several, like, Discord servers and communication. Like, I talk with some of the researchers, and there's even a server that I'm in where I've talked with various people who actually work on Death Battle directly, like writers, and just plenty of people who are just involved with it. So I when I say normies, I don't mean it in any, like, insulting manner. What I more mean when I say normies is people who just, like, oh, a Death Battle came out on YouTube, I'm gonna watch it. I don't know much about the characters, and I don't do, like, calculations and stats and stuff like that, so I'm gonna take what they say at face value and just working from there. That's more what I mean by normies. And for this fight, it's the first time that the normies are starting to really pick up on how bullshit DC is. I think Booster Gold was kind of the straw breaking the camel's back on that one. He's a goofy character, so anyone who had that perception of him going in, that he's the goofy character who can't be stronger than Cable, and then they just go, oh, no, took hits from Trigon, Doomsday, turned into some crazy interdimensional multiversal entity called Wave Rider. It just makes them immediately go, this is every character, isn't it? And that's kind of the problem that we are getting into, is that everyone is now aware DC probably wins. Now, this is actually problematic because it hasn't been a problem before, because the only people who were really annoyed about it were the more diehard fans, like people like myself, who the fight gets announced and I go, oh, well, I think we had about an hour when Booster Gold versus Cable was announced where we're like, oh, hey, Marvel might actually win one. And then someone was like, no, he's actually done, like, all of this crazy shit. And we're like, oh, fair enough. 2 weeks can go by now. So with people starting to kind of notice it a lot more, it is leading to the fact where I've seen several comments of people saying that they are, in fact, going to skip this next episode just because they're tired of seeing DC character inherently wins because of just all these crazy feats that we've more or less already seen 1,000 times. Some comic panel saying that, like, in a nanosecond they did this. I think it would actually do Death Battle well for a little bit of time to kind of cool it on DC characters. Personally, I think that goes as far as kind of like cooling it on Marvel as well, because I'm very burnt out on those two series. And now, I perfectly understand that those tend to be their big matchups. Those are the ones that gain all the views. But crunching the numbers for this season, those numbers have been diminishing pretty hard. I believe the more popular ones this season have been like Goro versus Machamp, and I think Kakashi versus Obi-Wan. the more they're actually getting more views on the more interesting episodes than just the Marvel character and their DC counterpart, or like Black Canary versus or Sindel versus Black Canary. Yeah, I'm getting names mixed up here. But either way, like, I think it's getting to the point where we can kind of rest it a bit on DC characters, especially, because it is starting to negatively impact the show itself. And now, I'm not saying that episodes with those characters are going to be bad. I tend to enjoy them quite a bit when they come out. But viewership is starting to kind of, like, notice that. And, even if they like the episode, it's a good animation, they have some funny lines, it's a well thought out verdict, it's kind of just blending together, becoming samey. Especially when DC and Marvel are just so renowned for everyone has fought everyone. Like, you want to make Catwoman FTL? There was a time where 3 different Flashes were all trying to, like, beat the shit out of Batman, and she just one-shotted each of them in order before they could reach Batman. Boom! Super FTL Catwoman, and that can scale to 800 characters across all of DC. Just the mentality that goes into debating with these kinds of characters is getting really tiring, to be honest. I would actually really like it if, like, we got, like, a season that was more focused on, like, video games, movies, like some anime, cartoons, things like that. There's so many other things that we can tap into at this point. You're not pigeonholed with needing, like, oh, we don't have enough interesting fights. When I was actually talking to someone on Discord about this, I mentioned that you could literally do a full 20-episode season in the format of this season with just fights that are video game character against video game character, and you could easily fill it with, like, a ton of interesting fights that just are plentifully requested. It's just a matter of that we just apparently need to get these comic fights in there that are just kind of dragging things down sometimes. And I think this episode is one of the best indications of that, because here's the magic of She-Ra potentially winning. The only reason she would win is if they include the comics. You know who made the comics? DC. So right now we are in a hilarious situation where the only reason that one side or the other is going to win is because of just DC craziness. I got nothing actually against DC. I don't think that their characters are bland and uninteresting or anything like that. I'm just getting real tired of seeing them in Death Battle, to be honest. Yeah, I just kind of like... well, that's more or less the rant that I wanted to get out. I'm not too sure if I'm going to have any specific content or anything like that during the break with DBX. I mean, I suppose I could potentially have, like, a little thing where I kind of look at who would actually win between the two people for the DBX. That could be kind of like an interesting thing. Like, for example, Thor versus Vegeta. It really depends on the iteration of Thor. There are some versions of Thor that are, like, extremely multiversal. And Thor would also be a good bit faster and have better hacks. So, as far as the one that comes out on, I think it's Wednesday. Like, we're going Sunday, the fight comes out. Monday, it hits YouTube. Wednesday, DBX comes out. Like, so we got a pretty packed week there. So let me know if you would be interested in me kind of like doing a bit of a breakdown on DBX matchups. Because that could be interesting to do. Just let me know what you think in the comments. So with that said, I will see you guys either for those DBXs or when we get the next matchup for Death Battle, which, as far as I know, has Beerus. So that'll be interesting. All right, have yourselves a good one.